Talking to mental health, Dan Draper is the host of a new mental health podcast. It's called Wrapping My Head Around It. He joins me now. Dan, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Lovely to see you in the studio.
Yes.
It's very rare we get guests on this show.
Oh, really?
So it's wonderful to see your face.
Oh, thank you very much.
Did you see the stuff around Prince William yesterday talking about that? It's World Suicide Prevention Day. I think it was on Monday, wasn't it?
Yes.
People are talking about it a lot this week.
Yeah.
And we do tend to talk about it much more than we ever did, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing. Like, we're releasing the stigma around such a taboo subject now. And it's great to get the conversations going. It really, really is. And I think that it's working for so many people. And people are so more open about how they talk about their mental health and, you know, how to promote well-being and looking after themselves now. Years ago, we wouldn't have done that previously.
Now, this isn't the first time you've talked about mental health, is it? Because you did have another podcast for the last couple of years talking about mental health. Why did you begin talking about it? What was your story?
So my story, oh, goodness me, this was years ago now. So for me, I suffered with grief and the depression that came around that. I lost 3 people in 10 days whilst I was at one of my highest points. I was travelling in Southeast Asia, having the time of my life, and then I lost a family friend, I lost my nan, and then the one that hit me the most was my cousin Dean, who we grew up as brothers. We were so close. We were 9 days apart, and he'd never let me forget about it. And I think that losing him so tragically as well, because he had an issue with his heart that was completely undiagnosed.
Yeah.
And
suddenly died.
Yeah, suddenly. He had an issue on the rugby pitch, got taken to our local hospital when I lived back in Essex. And then got transported to a heart specialist hospital and unfortunately didn't survive the operation.
How old was he?
He was, at the time, 25, recently married with a baby on the way.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
That's a lot to take in. And within those 10 days, you also lost 2 other people in your life.
Yeah. And again, this for me, I was in Vietnam at the time. So for me, I found all this information out as I was getting a 6-hour cab journey back from where I was staying in the beautiful mountainsides and then going back to the airport. And then,
Was it kind of instant when you were there, the feeling of grief and devastation? Or did it take some time for you to get to that stage?
I think for me it was just the initial shock. I think it was, you know, when we talk about grief, there's so many different forms, but I think for me I was just in utter disbelief because I was actually sat in the airport cafe and I was on the FaceTime to my mum and she said, you know, he didn't make it. And I said, sorry, what? And she said, don't make me repeat it, Daniel. So at that point, I slammed my hands on the table, unfortunately. Then a glass fell down and 6 armed police came round me with guns drawn. And I thought, oh my goodness, I don't need this, lads. Come on.
My life. And so you started talking about mental health and it helped you talking about it with others.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that for me, you know, it was a long process. I mean, this happened back in 2016 and I only started the first podcast that I did in 2020 when we first went into lockdown. So for me, I felt that, you know, it was a good thing to talk about mental health because, you know, we're such a free society and then to be locked up and cooped up for so long and with, you know, the scariness that was COVID at the time as well. A lot of people were, you know, really worried about their mental health, their families, you know, and I always reference this. I always say that my football lads, they're rubbish about talking about mental health and feelings. But in our group WhatsApp, it was very much, how is everyone? Oh, I'm not doing great. Like, I'm not feeling great mentally. I'm used to being out and about on a building site or something like that. And that for me was the catalyst for me to just go, do you know what? People have said to me for years to start a podcast and talk about something and just get it done.
So we've really had a sea change in the way that we talk about it. What are you hoping to achieve in this particular podcast? It's called Wrapping My Head Around It. Great title.
Thank you.
What are you hoping to achieve doing this one? Anything different from the one you did before?
I think for me, it's just bringing a broader market to talking about mental health. You know, for me, I've upgraded the podcast. I've rebranded it. And, you know, it's now visual. So it's all on YouTube because I know that a lot of people, especially younger people, are watching YouTube and into YouTube more than they are telly now. All my nieces and nephews,
they just watch YouTube all day long. That's
exactly
what they do.
Yeah. And I was thinking, you know, if there's something there that I can do, to promote that on some other platforms and go from there, because a lot of people will listen to podcasts and download it and it's fantastic, but if you can have that visual aspect to it as well and actually see in real time people's reactions and how they go through it, then for me that's absolutely, you know, what I'm here for. And I'm as I said, I'm just here to release the stigma around mental health and, you know, get rid of that taboo. I'm not medically trained, I'm not a medical professional, I'm just a normal guy that just wants to talk about it and keep conversations going.
And where can people find it, Dan?
So you can find it all all over, all your Spotify's, your Apple Music.
All the usual places you get podcasts.
All the usual podcast places. Yeah. You can find it on YouTube as well. You just type in Wrapping My Head Around It and you'll find it there. But there's a lot of things that will be going up on my socials as well. So my Instagram is at Wrapping My Head Around It podcast for the podcast. If not, it'll be all on mine, which will be at Dan Draper, Draper, with 2 underscores at the end of my name.
Thank you so much for coming in. It's lovely to see you.
Thank you.
Good luck with the podcast. Because I saw the first one. Who's the guest on that?
So that's Harley. She's a singer-songwriter who's worked with Joel Corey. She's worked with James Hype.
Great voice.
Great voice.
Who's coming up next?
We've got a YouTuber called Al Casey, who has had a really, really difficult journey. I've got another mental health podcaster coming on. We're doing a collaboration. And actually, in the very near future, Dr. Rosanna Allen Khan.
Oh, the Tooting MP.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. She's going to come on as well. She used to be, only just recently stepped down from being the shadow mental health minister. Yeah. Dan, listen, wonderful to have you in. Thank you so much. That's about it from me this morning. I'll be back tomorrow morning from 5. On the way next, Sam Wadani with the BBC Radio London Breakfast Show.